I'm working at this Université Paris-Saclay. It's the first French university on the Shanghai ranking. We are excessively proud of that. It's our mission to always say it. So, and my lab has been the lab I'm working in. It has been quantifying cannabinoids for the hemp sector in France for 30 years. We invented the Santica variety for the FNPC, now hempit, and so on. So we have a long experience with cannabinoid analytical chemistry. I know you guys, the few of you here are traveling a lot and you have a lot of international experience. So, but we still always have cliches. So, but we are dozens of French here, so you must have seen that we don't wear striped shirts. We didn't walk around with a baguette, and we didn't have a beret. But yet, we in France, you all know that we smoke a lot, and especially weed. We are the first, this has been said. And we have been for a long time known for not having absolutely no legal cannabis at all. Now it's a bit different. At least some French can benefit from medical cannabis. This topic has been already addressed by Christopher Keynes earlier today, and by Frank a little bit as well. So we'll basically see it from another perspective, but facts don't lie, so basics are going to be the same. You all know that, of course. France has been quite slow to have this leap into medical cannabis, and basically this is the way France said officially, okay, we feel a lot of pressure, we cannot stand it anymore, we have to go into medical cannabis. So this is how France explained it. Well, there are scientific data, there is a lot of demand and request from patients, and everybody around us is doing it. So previous slide, 80% of the EU member states. So it was a great time to go into medical cannabis. And the French way was to do this so-called experimentation. So what the hell is an experimentation? This is, we love experimentation in France because we are highly, making a lot of rules. So at some times we need the field to take a breath and try original things. So this is a way to set up a new policy without changing the general regulation for a defined time period, and to check whether a question can be addressed. Is it a good idea to go to that direction? And so on. Often experimentation lead to the general adoption, but yet we start with this at the beginning. So, as it states here, the purpose is to validate an hypothesis. So, what were the hypotheses for the French cannabis experimentation? The prerequisite were to consider that, okay, cannabis efficacy must be ascertained. What is it really efficient for? We need to look at the data. And then if we go into dispensing cannabis, this will be difficult. We need to set up a dedicated system, and these products are not official drugs or medicines, so we need a specific quality control. So the first target of this experimentation was to assess the feasibility of providing medical therapeutic cannabis. This is the main goal. And the secondary is to put together French data on efficacy and safety. So the French approach was to give this task to the ANSM, the French drug agency. I put the different names of the directors and the ministers who changed in the meantime. And in this task, ANSM did quite a great effort to make this as participative as possible. So they put up groups of working groups involving, patients or representative of patients associations and so on, academic, expert, and they made a lot of auditions, including private companies. And so they said they did do that in 3 phases, so to speak. The first group had the task to decide for which indication the cannabis could be used. The second group, from which I was part of, was dedicated to setting up the practical aspects of the experimentation. And then the third group, who started just recently, has the task to follow up the running experimentation. And this experimentation was backed up by a legal framework, in which I draw your attention on the fact that this text was speaking about products meeting pharmaceutical standards. What does really mean? We are going to go back to this later. So practical aspects were the 5 W's, who, where, and so on, when. So I tried to gather all the informations. So as Christopher said earlier, it has been decided to include 3,000 patients. This means at any time. So if we enroll 3,000 patients and after 2 months or 1 year, the half has dropped off, then we will renew them and to have a constant 3,000 persons. So at the end, most probably more than 3,000 patients will be included. These are the 5 indications that were selected. And for some reason, we decided to, NSM decided to make, allocation of patients in each of these indications. The figures are here. And since the first prescription of cannabis is mandatorily made by a reference center, what does that mean? A hospital in which you have a dedicated service for pain or palliative care and so on. And the mapping of NSM had to take care that France was nicely covered. And so more than 200 reference centers were chosen on a voluntary basis. In Metropole, as we said, the continental and also the territories overseas. So how can a patient be included? He must, next slide we'll see the contraindication and so on, but the patient can just go to his general practitioner and say, I would like to benefit from cannabis, and then he has to go to a reference center. But the reality is probably that reference centers have already a lot of patients to take care, and they will pick the patients from their well-known patients suffering a lot, and also for whom it's well known that the usual treatment is not efficient and is insufficient to relieve the problems. So it's always a second or a third line, last resort treatment, cannabis. So the question about how will the patient prove that it's part of the experimentation be known, he will have to always have with him at least 2 documents, the inclusion attestation and also the prescription. The conditions to be included were that, as I said, the patient must be insufficiently relieved or show side effects for his current treatment. And he must show any sign of pregnancy, history of psychosis, any main organ failure, and cardiovascular disease or history. So you see, it's not minor exclusion criteria. And he must, of course, be able to understand what it's all about, which is not always the case if we go deep into the kind of treatment pathologies that affect the patients. It has been decided at some point that driving was excluded for the patient under the experimentation, and this has already led to some patients dropping off because this is too harsh. About the physicians and the pharmacists, one point of the experimentation for which INSM is quite proud is to have thought about in advance about training the prescriptors and the physicians, so that they know what to do and they cannot say, okay, we are not comfortable with this treatment, we have not been told about it during the medical course at the university, and so on. So this training not only exists, but it's also mandatory to be a part of the experiment. The first prescription must be forcibly made in this reference center, but then after this first prescription, the patient can go to his normal family doctor, who will renew the prescription at least every month. And several appointments are imposed, are obliged to be followed, like 5 or 6 appointments. This will be on the following slide. It just started 2 months ago, so it will run until end of March 2023. After the next presidential election, as we will see. Another point that was proposed is to set up a register in which every single detail of the patient, of the efficacy of the provision of the products and so on will be put with many details. So this implies significant time spent with the patients. This will be done in the reference center, and the family doctor can only just renew the prescription quickly, but any participant of the experiment must be trained with this 2.5 officially hour online training, in which general items on cannabis, the plant, the chemistry, the endocannabinoid system, and so on, the routes of administration are addressed for all the participants, only the health professionals, not the patients, and not the public. This is completely locked it excludes public access. And of course, a neurologist will have dedicated advice and guidelines for prescription for epilepsy and so on, neuropathy and pain and so on. And one subtle detail is that since all these things have been mainly outsourced by INSM, they have to pay for it. And it costs a lot of money, and the number of trainees is limited, and only 4,500 trainees can be accepted for this training. So they are already trying to restrict a little bit the professionals that will take part to this training, because they fear that they will not have enough places. So this means that any pharmacist, for example, who would be curious about cannabis cannot follow the training. About the manufacturers and the products, so it appeared necessary to set up a specification for these products, which would come from outside France, of course, because we could not, we were not able to provide these products. So these specifications and the structure of this call was mainly based on the Luxembourg call, which happened to have been posted just before. And the great idea for this specification was basically very pragmatic, to ensure quality and reproducibility of the product, traceability and security. And the idea was to say, okay, do the way you want, but give the evidence that you do it well. So that's the reason we didn't, for example, impose some given analytical methods and so on. So just prove that work well, and this ended up in a file application significantly, of course, lighter than a drug master file or a CTD, and mostly focused on quality. So the companies that were selected, and the selection went through a very detailed, grid with quotation marks and so on. So we were 6 people looking at the application and ranking. Okay, there is GMP document, yes, no, how many points, and so on. So this is completely algorithmic. There was no way to choose on subjective basis. And the color code is to help you to see how it ended up in a nicely diverse, so to speak, selection, with Aurora being selected for the flowers, and so with other companies being selected as well. So if everything works well, if everyone does his job here, only these principal providers should be actually part of the experimentation. These ones being selected only if problem with the first one. What was the interest of manufacturer to go into this free providing of the products? So the cost of the products only, not for the entire experimentation, was evaluated at 3 million euros. Christopher this morning was saying 20 millions. It's evaluation, so no one really knows, but it's significant amount of investment, so to speak. And this is not the only thing, because the manufacturer had to pair with a French distributor, so find it, make agreements, and so on. Many points of the call were to kind of have the manufacturer to understand that he has to make a strong commitment to really ensure the provision of the product, without being sure that at the end he will have any kind of monopoly. So, okay, you do the effort, but you won't have any reward of any kind. And even more than that, if at the first sign of a delay or something, INSM can switch to the secondary provider. So it was really high expectations from the INSM. And then at some point we realized, okay, well, if we want to make the flowers available, we need to provide the vaporizer. So initially NSM tried to ask the manufacturer to provide the vaporizer as well, but they say, no, you are going too far, we cannot do that. So NSM was obliged to launch a call for vaporization devices, which is ended now and which is under reviewing. And in this case, they will buy the instruments and they will give it for free to the patients without lending or renting, and then the vaporizer will stay with the patient at the end. So where are we now? 2 months into the experiment, more than 300 patients have been included. Some say it's good, some say it starts very slowly. So physicians say, okay, give us time to, understand how it works and so on. So far, because of this absence of the vaporizer, only the oral forms are available. And already some patients dropped off because of the driving restriction, as I said, and because they didn't tolerate the treatment. And physicians said, okay, we had a lot of work with COVID, so we will start to work on it now. And some information came back that some physicians already start to assemble and mix the different products. So this experiment is not an authorization of medical cannabis. This is the way I see it, because outside this out of real life experimentation, cannabis remains completely forbidden. It's not a clinical trial on cannabis. This has been considered that for this indication, the evidence is here. It doesn't have anything to do with the current official medicines based on cannabis. So Sativex, Epidiolex, Marinol are not part of the experimentation, because these are drugs, so there was no need of a special treatment for these products. It's not planned to put some time in this experiment to see whether other indication would be possible or beneficial for the patient. No. We will stick to this indication, and it has nothing to do with legalization, of course. Many questions are still pending. For example, that my personal question is, why did we need why did we feel the need of going into such a sophisticated experimentation with the register, a dedicated register, many forms to fill, this training? Okay, you can see it from different sides, but it's the way I see it for myself. The product status is still not solved. These products are not medicines. They don't have any marketing authorization. They are not, I forgot the name, but you know what the pharmacist can do in his shop, in his pharmacy. It's out of any positive status. Since they are used and against pathologies, yes, they are drugs by presentation or by function, but this is kind of a negative status. So this is I see it as a major point to solve before going out from this experimentation. There will probably be no expansion of the number of patients during the experiment. And you can find many questions like, okay, after the experimentation, will the public benefit, from this product be used for cannabis, illegal cannabis prevention, and so on? No one thinks about that. We didn't take into account that maybe the product could be, asked on a wrong basis and be dispatched to the illegal market. This is not of the concern here. And many questions are pending also about how will the experimentation, how will the medical cannabis exist after the experimentation. In which frame? So probably the register will be dropped off because this is too complicated and it gives problem with the confidentiality. Training obviously remains needed, so it will have to work on how to still giving it, making it available for established professional, and definitely also included in the normal university curriculum. And the most of the big question for you in the industry sector are how many patients will first having these 5 conditions are susceptible to be included. Who knows? I mean, maybe 50,000. And even if we consider expanding other indication, if the target that was mentioned this morning by Christopher, about 1% of the population, this is 700,000. I personally feel that a bit optimistic, but we'll see. And of course, the reimbursement is the big question, and is tightly related to the status. If these products are not drugs, most probably they are not going to be reimbursed, but we'll see. And this is, all of these questions are, so to speak, outside of the remit of INSM. They are just, setting the experiment. So who got the question? Mostly the regulatory bodies. And in parallel of this experimentation, Parliament consultative mission has been set up over 1 year, and 30 deputies or member of parliament discussed about all the dimension of cannabis, so the medical cannabis, the well-being cannabis, as they say, and the recreative cannabis, to build proposals for the French Assemblée nationale. And one point which is interesting is that the deputy who at that time would put the amendment to open the experimentation is now the Minister of Health. So this is a good point to hope that hoping that it will go in a good direction. And in concerning the medical cannabis, the conclusion of this mission was to say that, okay, we need to modify the law. This is in the pipe. Let's see that in 6 months or 1 year from now. This training issue is key because several countries that opened to medical cannabis and did not take into account the training dimension went to a failure. So this is important to train the physicians. The question of status is important. At least, hopefully, fortunately, they understood that. Even if they are not going into the scientific aspect, they suggested that the indication and the medical conditions likely to benefit from cannabis could be expanded. They are talking about setting up a cannabis agency, as it is done in many countries now. And also they suggest to stimulate research, but especially on the fact that how to make possible the existence of being under cannabis and being able to drive. This is a key aspect for them because it's really a harsh condition. So as a conclusion, I would say that my personally feeling is that it's a quite complex setup of which INSM is quite proud and for which manufacturers are quite happy about because it was well done. It's still rather a closed market now because of this few indication of extended contraindication. But there is a political clear willingness to expand that after the experimentation. But there is this big uncertainty about the presidential election in between along the way. So we will see. The health minister will probably change, and we'll see. So this was my last slide, and by taking the idea of the beginning about cliches. I'm French. I'm here in Germany. We have a lot of cliches on each other. So, but clearly on these cannabis issues, I don't think we can. We were into these cliches because we all have problems and we all make the best to solve the problems. At least French and Germans, Italians have more problems, as we heard this afternoon. But well, we do our best, and we will see in 2 years from now what it will give. Okay, thank you for your attention.